Have you ever felt like you're walking through life with an invisible limp? Like every choice you make, what you say, who you trust, where you go, is shaped not by who you are, but by what hurt you. There's a silence that follows us. A silence that isn't peaceful. It's the hush after something broke. Most people don't recognize it. They call it personality. They call it preference. But deep down, it's a wound. A wound that never quite healed. A wound that became the architect of your behavior. You laugh a little quieter. You love a little later. You dream, only after checking if it's safe. And yet no one sees the scar. Not even you, sometimes. Because life taught you to wrap it up quickly. To move on. To grow stronger. But Ibn Sina, he saw it differently. Centuries before psychology gave names to traumas, before therapists spoke of childhood wounds, Ibn Sina wrote about the soul's illnesses. About grief that lodges in the heart like a splinter. About how pain, unspoken and unseen, becomes the quiet driver behind our lives. He didn't use the language of modern science. But he touched the very thing science still struggles to name. The ache behind the choices. We think we decide with logic. That we weigh pros and cons. That we act freely. But what if the truth is, we're not choosing with freedom. We're reacting with protection. There's a part of you that remembers. It may not recall the exact event, but it remembers how it felt. The betrayal. The loss. The moment you learned the world was not as kind as you hoped. And from that day, you started building a fortress. Brick by brick. Excuse by excuse. No, I don't have time. I'm not ready. I'm just not that kind of person. But these are not just boundaries. They are survival maps. Drawn by a younger version of you. Who was just trying to make it out whole. And the tragic part? That version of you still runs the show. Not because you're weak, not because you're broken, but because no one ever taught you how to sit with the wound. How to listen to it. How to let it finish its sentence. Ibn Sina believed the soul has ailments like the body. And like the body, it needs diagnosis. But not the kind you find in medical books. The kind you discover in silence. He once wrote that true healing begins when you stop trying to escape the ache. When you stop treating your wound like an enemy. When you learn to ask, what is this pain trying to tell me? Because pain is a messenger. Crude, maybe. Loud, yes. But always meaningful. It's the part of you that refused to die when everything else did. The part that carried your innocence through fire. That tried, again and again, to love, to believe, to show up, but when ignored, pain doesn't vanish. It transforms into anxiety, into detachment, into a life half-lived. You might find yourself surrounded by people, yet feeling terribly alone. You might be admired for your strength, but dying to be held. You might be the one always helping others, while silently wondering who will ever help you. And all of that? It begins with one unanswered wound. One moment that was too heavy for your nervous system, too loud for your mind to process, too raw for your heart to carry. So it buried itself, not in the past, but in your present, in your reflexes, in your fears, in your relationships. And every time someone gets too close, or something feels too unfamiliar, the wound whispers, "Don't, not again. Please, not this time." And so you shrink, smile, nod, lie. You pretend you're okay because you don't know who you'd be without the pretending. But there's another way, not an easy one, not a quick fix, but a path Ibn Sina hinted at. A path that starts, not with answers, but with attention, with the courage to turn inward, to sit in the quiet, to peel back the layers of protection. To see the frightened child inside you, and not look away, because that child is still waiting, still hoping, still believing that one day you'll return and finally say, I see you. I'm here now. We don't have to run anymore. That's how healing begins. Not with advice, not with distraction, not even with forgiveness, but with presence. Raw, unfiltered, gentle, like sunlight pouring through a broken window, not to judge the dust, but to show what's always been there. A soul that's tired of hiding. A heart that wants to love again. A wound that's ready to heal. What if I told you that healing doesn't begin with strength, but with softness? We've been taught to get over it, to move on, to prove we're unshaken. But the soul doesn't heal by force. It heals by being heard. And the most dangerous wounds are the ones you normalize. The betrayal you call a lesson. The loss you label as maturity. The emotional starvation you call independence. Ibn Sina understood this. He saw the way humans confuse numbness with healing. Just because something doesn't hurt anymore doesn't mean it's healed. Sometimes it just means it's buried too deep. You stop feeling, so you can function. You stop remembering, so you can survive. But beneath the silence, the wound lives on. In the hesitation when someone loves you too well. In the flinch when life finally offers peace. In the resistance to rest, because rest once meant danger. So you overwork. You overthink. You overgive. All to avoid a stillness that might whisper truths you're not ready to hear. But Ibn Sina reminds us. The soul has its own language. It speaks in metaphors, in sensations, in dreams. Not everything you feel can be explained. And not everything that can be explained needs to be fixed. Sometimes, all your soul wants is to be held. Imagine that. Imagine sitting with your pain, not as an enemy, but as a part of you that once loved too deeply, hoped too purely, trusted too blindly. And it broke you. But breaking wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something quieter. Something more sincere. In the quiet, you begin to notice things. Like how you laugh differently now. How your friendships feel lighter or lonelier. How your dreams shifted shape when you stopped believing you were allowed to have them. This isn't overthinking. This is awakening. It's the moment you stop blaming the world and start asking your soul, what are you trying to show me? Because healing doesn't look like perfection. It looks like honesty. It looks like finally admitting, I'm tired of pretending I'm fine. It's not about becoming fearless. It's about walking through life with your fear in one hand and your self-respect in the other. It's about showing up to your own heart, not as a fixer, but as a friend. Ibn Sina believed that every soul carries within it a blueprint, not of who it should be, but of who it already is. Your job isn't to invent yourself. It's to return to yourself. Like a traveler who wandered too far, only to find that home was always within. But how do you return to a self you buried? With patience. With slowness. With compassion. Not by tearing down the walls in one night, but by noticing the cracks. By sitting at the edges of your own silence, and listening to the voice that doesn't speak in words. The voice that sighs when you're around people who drain you. The voice that clenches your stomach when something isn't right. The voice that whispers, no, when your mouth says, yes. That voice is your soul. And Ibn Sina would say, to ignore it is the beginning of all imbalance. Because when your soul speaks, it's not trying to ruin your plans. It's trying to rescue your truth. We often wait for a breaking point, a loss, a burnout, a betrayal, but the soul doesn't need tragedy to awaken. It only needs your attention. It only needs you to pause long enough to hear it say, I miss you. I'm still here. Come back to me. And maybe that's all healing really is. Not an event, not a finish line, but a lifelong conversation with your own depth. A willingness to stay when everything in you wants to run. A decision to feel, even when feeling burns. Because that pain? It's not punishment. It's memory. It's the part of you that remembers what it means to be real. You can numb it. You can deny it. You can silence it. But you cannot erase it. Because your soul was made to feel. And feeling is how you remember you're alive. So let the ache be sacred. Let the confusion be a classroom. Let the quiet become a companion. And maybe, just maybe, you'll start to see what Ibn Sina saw. That the soul is not a machine to be repaired. It's a garden to be remembered. Not every broken thing needs fixing. Some just need space to bloom. And you're not behind. You're not late. You're not lost. You're just learning how to come home to a part of you that's been waiting for a very, very long time. There's a silence that heals, and there's a silence that hides. Most people never learn the difference. The silence that heals is intentional. It's sacred. It comes when you finally stop lying to yourself. When you stop performing and simply sit with what is. But the silence that hides is the one you inherit. From the times you cried and no one noticed. From the times you spoke and weren't believed. From the day you learned that being too emotional was a weakness. And so you stopped expressing anything at all. Ibn Sina would have told you this. The soul doesn't stop speaking when you silence it. It just changes its language. It starts showing up in your body. In your fatigue. In your tension. In the tightness in your chest when you walk into certain rooms. In the anxiety that rises when you try to slow down. The soul speaks, even in stillness. But you have to be quiet enough to hear it. And that's what most of us fear. Not the noise, but the quiet beneath it. Because what if the silence is filled with sadness? What if it reminds you of all the things you never said? All the dreams you buried just to be accepted. All the boundaries you erased so you could belong. What if, in the silence, you finally meet yourself? And what if you don't like who you've become? That's the terrifying beauty of inner stillness. It confronts you, not to punish you, but to invite you back. You see, healing isn't about changing who you are. It's about reclaiming who you were before the world told you who to be. And that reclamation begins in silence. True silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's the absence of pretending. It's sitting without distraction, without scrolling, without talking, just breathing. And slowly, you begin to hear a different voice. A quieter one. Not the critic, not the planner, not the perfectionist, but the voice that says, I miss being me. I want to rest. I'm tired of performing. At first, that voice is hard to hear. Because it speaks gently, like a child afraid of being yelled at. But the more you listen, the stronger it gets. And you realize, you've never really been alone. You've just been out of touch. Ibn Sina spoke of the nafs, the inner self, not as a villain to defeat but as a friend you forgot to nourish. He didn't believe in suppression. He believed in understanding. That's why his approach to healing was never forceful. It was reflective, compassionate, slow. Because real healing isn't loud. It's subtle. It happens when no one's watching. When you stop judging yourself for not being over it. When you finally admit that some things changed you, and that's okay. Healing is letting that be true, without shame. It's realizing that your soul didn't break. It adapted. It learned how to keep you safe. It learned how to hide the wound so you could keep moving. But now you're safe enough to return. Not to relive the pain, but to honor the part of you that survived it. Maybe this is what peace really is. Not forgetting the past, not escaping the emotions, but embracing the full complexity of your own story. Peace isn't clean. It's not neat or simple. It's messy and raw and real. It's laughing while still carrying grief. It's dreaming again even while afraid. It's loving while remembering the ache of loss. And maybe the greatest act of healing is believing that you're allowed to feel all of it. That you don't have to earn rest, or justify your softness, or explain your tears. That your soul is worthy, simply because it exists. Ibn Sina's wisdom was not meant to be followed like rules. It was meant to be remembered, like a melody you once knew but forgot how to hum. And maybe that's what this silence is doing. Teaching you how to hum again. How to be with yourself again. How to love yourself without needing to perform strength. Because the truth is, the strongest people aren't the ones who never fall apart. They're the ones who fall apart and choose to come back anyway. They choose to rebuild, slowly, tenderly, truthfully, and in that rebuilding, they find not the person they used to be, but someone gentler, wiser, freer, someone who no longer chases peace like it's out there, but discovers it quietly, in here. So if today you feel broken, if today you feel like you can't go on, maybe that's not the end. Maybe it's the beginning. Maybe this is the silence that heals. And maybe, just maybe, your soul has been waiting for this moment all along. Somewhere along the journey, you realize you don't need to fix everything. You just need to stop pretending you're not hurting. That shift alone can move mountains inside you. You stop waking up every day with a war plan. You stop negotiating with your emotions like they're enemies. And instead, you begin to sit with them. Not to control them, but to listen. This is what Ibn Sina would have called the true medicine of the soul. Not force, not denial, but presence. You learn to give space to your sadness without rushing it. You start honoring your exhaustion without labeling it as laziness. You allow your body to be tired. You allow your heart to be confused. You allow your mind to pause. And in this simple act of allowing, you create room for something new. Authenticity, not the kind you post online, but the kind that feels like coming home after years of exile. Authenticity doesn't mean you're always strong. It means you're finally real. And it's in those quiet, unfiltered moments that the healing begins to show. You no longer smile when you don't want to. You don't force conversations when you crave silence. You don't perform confidence when you're scared. Instead, you speak gently with yourself. You let your inner child rest. You begin to rebuild, brick by honest brick, a version of you that doesn't require masks. And no, it's not easy. Because those masks once kept you safe. They helped you survive in a world that didn't always welcome your softness. But surviving is not the same as living. And now, you're learning to live, one tiny act of truth at a time. You start saying, no, without guilt. You start saying, yes, without fear. You ask for help without shame. You stop apologizing for simply existing. This is the slow rebirth of the soul. And like any birth, it's messy, painful, and miraculous all at once. You begin to see your life as soil. Not ruined, but ready. Ready to grow something more real this time. No more planting things just to please others. No more pretending to bloom when you're breaking. Instead, you wait. You water yourself. You rest in the dark. And then, without warning, the first green shoot emerges. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. But it's yours. A sign that you are, in fact, still capable of growth. Still capable of joy. Still capable of becoming someone new. This is not about reinventing yourself. It's about remembering yourself. The self that existed before the world taught you who to be. And every step forward now is guided not by fear, but by honesty. You begin to rebuild a relationship with yourself. Not based on expectations, but on compassion. You talk to yourself kindly. You forgive yourself for not knowing better. You let go of the versions of you that only existed to protect your pain. And in that space, you begin to breathe again. Not just with your lungs, but with your soul. The air feels lighter. The silence feels safer. The future feels less like a threat and more like a possibility. Because now, you're not running. You're resting. You're not hiding. You're revealing. You're not pretending. You're becoming. And what you're becoming is someone you no longer have to abandon to be loved. Someone you no longer have to shrink to be accepted. Someone who can stand in their own truth without fear of rejection. This is the gift Ibn Sina left us. Not in formulas or doctrines, but in the quiet permission to be human. To ache, to question, to break, and still, to return home to yourself. So here you are now. Not fixed, but free. And maybe that's better. Because perfection is a myth. But freedom is real. And you taste it in every moment you choose truth over performance. In every breath you take that doesn't require explanation. In every tear you let fall without apologizing. You're not who you were. And that's okay. You're not who others expect. And that's beautiful. Because finally, you're becoming who you were always meant to be. Not in spite of the wound, but because of it. The wound shaped you, but it no longer defines you. And that's where real peace begins. Not in escaping your past, but in embracing your power to grow from it. This is your return. This is your rebirth. This is your truth. And now, you get to live it. Sometimes healing doesn't look like a grand transformation. It looks like being able to sit with yourself, without flinching. It's making tea for one, and not feeling lonely. It's walking into a room, and no longer needing to impress. It's catching your reflection in the mirror and not looking away. That's peace. Not the fireworks kind, but the slow, steady kind that builds quietly under the skin. You begin to notice the stillness within you. You begin to crave silence, not because you're numb, but because, for the first time, it feels like home. You no longer fill every moment with noise. You no longer run from the dark. Instead, you let the dark hold you. Not as punishment, but as protection. Because sometimes, the dark is where the roots grow. Sometimes, the dark is where the soul mends. Sometimes, the dark is where God speaks in whispers only the broken can hear. And maybe, that was the lesson all along. That your wound wasn't a mistake. It was a doorway. A hidden passage carved by divine hands, leading you back to the parts of yourself you thought were lost. And now that you've walked through it, now that you've faced what you thought would destroy you, you realize it wasn't there to kill you. It was there to awaken you. Ibn Sina once described the soul as a mirror. But mirrors don't work in chaos. They require stillness. And now that your mind is no longer thrashing, now that the inner waters have calmed, you can finally see yourself clearly. Not the you others told you to be. Not the you buried under performance. But the real you, soft, strong, scarred, sacred. And for the first time, you look into your own eyes and say, I know you. That knowing, that deep, unshakable recognition, is the beginning of peace. Because how can you fear yourself when you finally understand your own pain? How can you run from what you've already embraced? You begin to rewrite your story. Not to erase the sorrow, but to place it in its proper light. The darkness wasn't the end of your story. It was the ink. And every tear, every ache, every sleepless night, was a word in the language of becoming. And now, you are fluent in your own truth. You speak not with bravado, but with wisdom. You move not with urgency, but with purpose. And though the world may never understand the path you've walked, you no longer need them to. Because you do. And that's enough. You carry the wound with gentleness now. Not as a weight, but as a reminder. Of where you've been. Of what you've survived. Of the beauty that was born from the breaking. You are no longer searching for peace outside yourself. Because you've built a home within. A sanctuary of stillness. A garden of grace. And here, in this sacred space, you discover the greatest miracle of all. That the pain didn't ruin you. It revealed you. And what it revealed is breathtaking. You are not broken. You are blooming. Not because the pain is gone, but because you're growing around it. Like ivy curling gently over old stone. You are art. Not despite the cracks, but because of them. You are human. Not in perfection, but in presence. You are home. Not in a place, but in yourself. And that, perhaps, is what Ibn Sina always meant to teach. That true healing is not about erasing the wound, but learning to live in harmony with it. To let it guide you, but not define you. To honor it, but not fear it. To remember that sometimes the soul does not heal in light, but in the tender darkness of surrender. And when you finally surrender, not in defeat, but in trust, you begin to rise. Not like a phoenix, but like a whisper returning to breath. Like a child returning to the arms of something sacred. Like a soul returning to itself. You are returning. And the path, though painful, was never your enemy. It was the teacher. It was the way. So now, you walk forward. Not fixed. Not fearless. But whole. And maybe, just maybe, that's where peace has been waiting for you all along.